There are a few exceptions.
All right.
Like say
Okay.
that
But
all right,
let's talk about the exceptions then.
Well, no, but the exceptions are at the difference. No, wait a minute. The exceptions I mentioned, for example, the Belgians in the Congo. There, they didn't even pretend to have a civilizing mission. There, it was pure material self-interest. These are the exceptions. There are, as far as I know, no exceptions on the other side. There are. I mean, maybe I've left out a case of history, but as I see the history of colonialism, the great mass of cases are cases where a powerful country was working in its perceived material self-interest and was covering what it was doing to itself and to the world with very pleasant phrases about preserving Christian values or helping the poor benighted natives or one thing or another. Now, there are a few exceptions where there's pure predatory imperialism. No, not even any pretense of doing anything, but these are quite rare.
But not
and we're in the
not
mainstream of
all that
imperialism.
The
Pure predatory imperialism?
Sure, the history of the Roman Empire.
Well, let's take one. I mean, since the Industrial Revolution.
Since the Industrial Revolution. Well,
You know,
if you say that people have refined the art of apologetics, I don't deny it. But it is also true, and I think manifestly true, that there have been interferences with the affairs of other nations whose purposes were, in my judgment, manifestly benign.
For example?
Or for instance, the Truman Doctrine.
Oh, I don't think that was manifestly benign at all. That was an attempt to
well, the Greeks
develop an
benign. I think the
Greek situation was benign, not at all. We were
I
trying
say
to...
the Greeks' testimony is more interesting to me than yours.
Which Greek testimony?
The
testimony of the thousands of people who were thrown into jail and...
well, I grant not the testimony of the Greek communists who were beaten.
Or the Greek peasants who were...
Well, there again, is it a conceptual difference that between the person who desires a life under some kind of freedom and one who desires life under some kind of... under communism?
No, because there's no such opposition in Greece. There was a distinction between a very repressive regime, which we instituted in 1946, and another regime, I don't know what it would have been, that would have grown out of the victory of the so-called communists. Now, if you see, what we did had nothing to do with freedom. What we instituted was
This is absolute historical romantic, I would say,
I don't
because
believe
the number of people who were slaughtered in Greece, first by the communist insurgency, then by the Nazis, then again by the communists, add up to an enormous
communist insurgency before the Nazis? Which one?
Not insurgency, conquest.
Communist conquest before the Nazis
communist
in Greece?
Insurgency.
Prior to the Nazis in Greece?
Yes, the Civil War of the early 40s.
My point is
that the Greeks...
your history is quite confused.
No, that's not bad at all. No, it isn't
actually. There was no communist insurgency prior to the Nazis. There were communist resistance bands that fought against the Nazis.
This is a matter of nomenclature. The point is that the 40-year-old or the 45-year-old Greek has fought 3 times in certain ventures, in one of which they acknowledge that we bailed them out.
Who is they? Who is they? The rulers of Greece acknowledge that.
No, also the people.
Oh, I'm quite unaware of that. I'm quite unaware that the people of Greece have spoken on this issue.
Even Papandreou, you like him, I assume, because he hates us.
No, not at all. Not at all. George Papandreou was one of the people who was...
I'm talking about Andrea, which makes it even...
Yes, Andreas Papandreou.
They're both on record as being grateful to President Truman for his intervention in that part of the world in 1947.
In that case, I disagree with him on that issue. I really think we had no right to intervene in Greece in 1947.
No, now we're talking about rights,
and which
gets us away from the discussion.
All right, let's talk about whether
we did it whether or not there is such a thing as relatively disinterested international interference. It seems to me that America's record is rather good. We went through an imperialist phase, but we pulled out of it faster than any country in the history of civilization.
I think we're very deep.
Why did we pull out of the Philippines, for instance?
We pulled out of the Philippines because it became a bad investment.
Why?
Because if you look, American agricultural interests were very much opposed to back in the mid-30s, they were very strongly opposed to the free trade relationships which allowed Philippine crops to compete with them. That's why we pulled out of the Philippines.
Why do these agricultural interests authorize us to intervene in South Vietnam?
They did.
If you consider this is...
Because we didn't intervene on the basis...
This is the critical dimension.
No, I say that in the Philippines it was the critical dimension. Look, the world is a complex place.
I'm aware of
There are certain interests that were involved
MIT is a complex place.
Well, there were certain interests that were involved in our Philippine venture. There are different interests that are involved in our Vietnam venture. You see, our Vietnam... Don't forget that with the Second World War, America's imperial interests expanded enormously. I mean, prior to the Second World War, we were sort of a marginal imperialist power, except for the Monroe Doctrine. But since the Second World War, we became the world's major imperialist power. And Vietnam is simply one piece of an attempt to construct a very large integrated world system, of which Greece was another piece.
Yeah, we became an imperial power, Mr. Chomsky, in the sense that we inherited primary responsibility for any chain of action that might involve us in a third world war,
I don't believe
and
that's right.
and something that might involve the entire world in Holocaust. And
No,
under
I
the
don't believe that's
circumstances, well, I know you don't believe it, but
in fact, I think that
it might be
our
refreshing to listen to this point of view, which is that there are people who do believe that America, unhappily and certainly not desiring it, inherited the responsibility for trying to abort international Holocaust, and has from time to time done so by such ventures as the Truman Doctrine, martial aid, and things like that.
I don't agree
Was martial aid not as
No, martial aid is quite different. First of all,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.